And we are live. Hey guys, this is Ruben Dua from the Dub Podcast Connection Loop. And today I have with me Marcus Chan. Marcus is a sales leader, he's a thought leader, he's an innovator. There's so many amazingly interesting things that you're going to learn from Marcus in this podcast today. So I can't wait to get into it. We're going to make this visual, we're going to make this audible. I'm going to ask some really, really tough questions when it comes to the topic of objection handling, and specifically, how to handle objections when it comes to video messaging, recording video. There's this topic of like precognition, knowing what the objections are going to be. So, Marcus, if you could start with a short bio about yourself, and then we can get into the topic.
Yeah, 100% Ruben. So first off, thank you so much for having me on. So I'm Marcus Shannon, founder and head sales coach over at Venly Consulting Group, in which we work directly with B2B sales professionals, help them earn an additional $50,000 to $100,000 more without just working harder and helping them max out their commissions and comp plan. So we've been actually doing this business for about over 2 years now. We've been pretty fortunate, been featured in Forbes, Salesforce, LinkedIn, etc. But before this, I actually was in corporate America for over 14 years, working for two major Fortune 500 companies, in which I started as the absolute worst rep, eventually figured it out, got promoted 10 times in 10 years, worked for two companies, had a lot of fun doing it, ended up leading teams of over 100 plus employees and, winning every single award, President's Club, different awards, etc., just like that. But I'm excited to be here, excited to chat about objection handling today and more.
Very cool. So let's just get right into it. When we think of objection handling, traditionally speaking, when I think of objections in sales, I think of you're on a phone call, you're face to face, and you say, "Hey, why don't you buy this car?" And then the person says, "Well, I can't afford it," or "I don't like the color," or some objection. And then at that point, you need to figure out, well, do you steer them in a different direction, or do you figure out what the root cause is behind that objection and then try to solve it? Now, the challenge is now in a more virtual environment, more asynchronous environment, which of course is my favorite word. How do we precog objection handling?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think one of the coolest parts about in today's time, with the access to so many software and different tools, if you are relatively savvy in your sales process, or you've been doing sales calls for a while, selling to a specific audience, target market, and the most common objections, there are things you can do with even a video to help minimize the chances of those objections coming up and helping eliminate some of them. So, for example, even if we set, if we just the example you just mentioned about the car being too expensive, not having money for it, if that's a really common objection you're getting, what kind of content or videos could be created up front for that prospect to view to help show them why it's not going to be an objection? So, for example, that could be potentially having videos that really showcase maybe funding options or ways to access cash, or how it's going to help them achieve a greater desired result that far outweighs the money. So, when you understand what the most common objections are, you can actually create videos up front to help you pre-warm, at least pre-frame the prospect. So when you get to the sales call, and yes, if it does pop up in that call or the follow-up calls, they're at least mentally warmed up, and that helps you ease into being able to handle the objection, actually lead to a close.
Okay, so that makes sense. So, how much sort of strategy and planning can we put into our objection handling? Should we rehearse objection handling? Should we do surveys? How do we compile that data from existing customers, from prospects in a really honest, transparent way? And then how do we practice it? What's the step for that?
So I think the first thing is if you've done enough sales calls, well, first off, if you do a good job in your sales call, whether you close or not, you should hopefully be walking away, whether it's the first call, second call, third call, or obviously if it's enterprise, multiple calls, you should have an idea why you did not win the opportunity. And this is something you want to seek the truth on, because the more truth you can seek to understand exactly what held them back from moving forward with you, you realize pretty quickly you can actually eliminate a lot of objections up front if you do it properly. So it's understanding that, and really, it's really not just practicing your rebuttals. Because let me back up. So the mistake a lot of people make is they think, if a prospect says A, I'm going to say 1. If they say B, I'm going to say 2. If they say C, I'm going to say 3. And when you think this way, your objection handling feels like a ping pong match where it's back and forth, or a boxing match where you're trading punches and no one really feels good after it. But if you change your objection handling process to really seek to understand, where you're diving deep to really understand what the root cause is, then once you actually uncover it, then you're able to actually solve the objection. But more importantly, when you truly understand it, even if you can't necessarily handle it on the spot, then you are able to utilize that as part of your process up front to get better down the road. So now when you are getting a common objection of whether it's maybe it's uncertainty about your solution, you now have at least an understanding how you can actually overcome that when it shows up, once you realize that's a specific one. And I think one of the most important things to understand is when you're handling objections, seek the truth first. Seek the truth first and really validate the objection they're first giving you is a legitimate objection. I find 99% of the time, the first objection is a smokescreen. And sometimes when people are in a buying situation, they're getting asked to basically make a decision. They have this fight or flight mode kick in, and instinctually, even if they want to buy, they might just say, let me just think about it. And then at that point, a weaker sales professional will say, all right, cool, when should I follow up? Versus, hey, totally cool. Hey, no problem. I want you to take as much time as you want to think about it, make sure they feel comfortable, just so I can make sure I do a real good job, make sure I provide you the right information. What exactly is on your mind? What are you thinking about? Let them tell you. Dive in deep, seek to understand, and then from there, you're able to uncover. And then once you uncover the common objections you should understand frameworks to how to handle and respond back. And those do require practice, because if you are responding back in a way that does not put them at ease or give them conviction in you or your solution or your company, it's very hard for them to justify the purchase regardless.
Well, one of the expressions that I really don't like, and that I think is mostly used in the real estate industry, is that buyers are liars. Well, there's two. There's lists to last and buyers are liars. I don't like either of those. I think that they're antiquated, and I don't think that they allow us to empower ourselves and to find the accountability and to really being better, support people and better advocates and better sort of partners, right? So, that said, I agree with you to a certain extent that, the first objection is often sometimes that we say in a fight, flight, sort of amygdala hijack kind of a response. I could never afford that. Oh, you want to charge $10,000 for this advertising campaign? I could never afford that. Well, if one can't afford a $10,000 advertising campaign, they believe that $10,000 that they're going to spend every month is not going to yield them $20,000 or 30 or more. There's a belief that there's no inherent value in that offering. So I think that, to your point, the more seasoned salespeople, they really focus on what is the root cause of that. And the root cause of that is maybe a scarcity mindset, or maybe they've been burned in the past, or maybe they don't like the idea of a contract that's committing them for a year, or maybe even the fact that there's a no out clause on that $10,000 campaign, which stinks. Maybe there are clauses, maybe there are realities within the relationship and the contract and the arrangement that allow them to test. Well, it's $10,000, but you start with $100. Oh, well, I can deal with $100. So my question for you is, how do we compile more information? Because yes, you're right. We should do the research. We should be prepared. We should have this stuff in our minds. But as content creators, how can we fuel our website? Is it FAQs? Is it knowledge base? Is it YouTube videos? Give us some ideas on how we can get ahead of that.
100%. So I'll give you a good example that kind of ties into even the example of the advertising campaign that's $10,000. So the limiting belief there could be not understanding what the real opportunity cost is. So, if you want to sell against that objection in advance, and you can sell to small businesses, and to them, $10,000 may seem like a lot of money, but you also know it's going to yield them, say, $100,000, $200,000 in additional revenue per month or per year. Well, obviously, it's a great ROI. So that means now you can utilize that content to show that advertising spend is actually not an expense, but an investment. So now you can create content that can be either in your frequently asked questions to even core, breaking down the limiting belief, understanding what a true cost of inaction is. And that could be through sharing stories, mapping out stories on, say, LinkedIn, or filming a video yourself discussing a similar situation that's slightly different, not in buying that specific thing, but in your situation where maybe you had invest money and then you got an ROI out of it. And when you're able to share stories in a certain way, this helps position your prospect to understand, wow, that makes sense because I also had that limiting belief, but if I thought about it this way, it's way more valuable. And that can be YouTube content for sure. It could be anything. So for example, I'll give you an example. So just this week, I just wired $50,000 to join a brand new mastermind for myself for coaching. Now, 15 years ago, if I was tell my past version of myself that'd be wiring, well in the six figures this year now in coaching programs in a year, I would be like, that's insane. I would never do that 15 years ago. But now I also realize the power of investing $50,000 or $100,000 makes me, seven figures plus. Now I understand the ROI. Back then I didn't. So when I can share a story like this helps people understand that investing into coaching is not just about spending money, but it's actually an investment. If you take the action, you'll get an ROI. And then I can turn it into YouTube content. That could be a post. That could be an email. That could be really any type of piece of content I want to pre-warm a prospect up to help them understand that investing in themselves is really the best ROI across the board.
Now, very cool. Now, if you could just break down a failure story to us. We all learn from failures, and it's best to learn from other people's failures. So give us your sort of worst failure story when it comes to this, maybe where you just dropped the ball and what you learned from that.
Sure. Just in a sales situation. Is that right?
In a sales situation. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have plenty. I have plenty of examples of me failing. In fact, oftentimes in sales, hopefully, as we make mistakes, we're learning from our mistakes. And I would say the story I'm going to share with you is really a good example how I was being more of a rep with commission breath than actually being a professional. And I had this really large opportunity. This is years ago now. I had this really large opportunity, which initial first meetings I had, it gone really well. Decision maker really trusted me. We involved 5 other people. It's a pretty large opportunity. I'm really excited. And, we had set some good deadlines, in terms of next steps, mutual action plans. So I'm pretty excited. I'm like, this is done. Now, of course, what happens? That deadline comes up. We pass it. Can't get a hold of my prospect. So I remember I let a day go by. I call them, and then wait, don't hear back, don't hear anything, try again the next day, and then email. And as each day passes, I think I started calling this guy a couple times a day, and I was very worried because the quarter is coming to an end. I'm like, oh man, like this deal is not going to just make my quarter, but it's going to really just take me to the next level. So it gets to the end, by the end of the quarter, it's the end of the quarter, and it's been like a month now. And I think I probably called this guy every single day, or in the email, text. There's every single day I pretty much reached out some way, shape, or form. Because, I'm like, I got to be persistent. I got to get this deal done. And I probably a little over a month, I finally hear back from the guy. And the guy says, he just texts me, he emails me, he's like, sorry, Mark, we want somebody else. And I'm like, what the hell, man? I'm like this whole time, I thought it was gonna be me or whatever. And then, I'm trying to get feedback from this guy. And finally, after 2 weeks, he emails me back and says, hey, Marcus, we want someone else because, frankly, I found you too pushy in your back-end process. We told you the deadline, and then you basically call and text me every single day, basically for a month. And he's like, the truth is he actually had a personal issue. He was in the hospital or something. He's like, so here I am getting nonstop messages from you, and it's clearly you seem desperate, so we just want somebody else. And I'm like, wow. And that was such a good reminder there of being able to just understand and exercise that self-awareness. Because I gotten so caught up in just my own number, trying to hit my number, trying to make my quarter, trying to do all these things that I didn't really stop to think about how annoying it sounds. Even now I'm embarrassed to share the story because I'm like, why did I even do that? That guy could smell my desperation for sure. So moral story is, don't be afraid to actually that self-awareness, or have someone look at you from the outside in and say, hey, listen, pump the brakes and just be a good human being as part of your process. And would you actually enjoy someone selling to you that way? Because I know I wouldn't. So it was a good lesson for me to learn, but it was a pretty costly mistake for me. I never got that deal ever again.
Well, there's a movie scene that comes to mind. I think I think that humor is one of the best ways to heal, because we have all endured that story. Every single one of us. We've all felt pressure. We've all felt limiting beliefs, scarcity, and we've been told by so many people and in so much media that we got to keep grinding, and the gold is in the follow up. And so many people say that, and that, I think, is, to a certain extent, it's somewhat antiquated advice, because it's not in the follow up, it's in the value. You follow up just to get the value out there. But what's really funny to me is that when I hear about this story and I remember the times that I've done this, there's this one movie scene that comes to mind. I don't know if you can guess what I'm about to say, but it's actually the movie Swingers. And this is called the answering machine scene. All right. So I think everyone should just check out this scene. It's called Answering Machine Meltdown. This is with Jon Favreau, a very young Jon Favreau in this film. And it's absolutely hilarious. And the reason why it's hilarious is because, as you can imagine, he's calling a girl. It's not a prospect. And he just keeps going on this voicemail. So he just doesn't stop leaving these voicemail messages. And it's just absolutely comedic. And of course, she answers at some point. She says, "Never call me again."
Right. That's
right?
exactly what it was like.
Right. And I think the point of the story is that desperation smells.
Totally.
So if we're desperate because of the pressure, because of our bills that we got to pay, because someone told us that we should do this, it's not coming from a pure place. Oprah Winfrey says that whatever you start something with determines its outcome. So if you start with desperation, you're going to end with desperation. And a failed sales prospect is kind of desperate because you lose self-esteem, you lose confidence. It looks bad with your team. So all right. So now, what did you learn from this story, and then how can we all improve from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's ultimately, typically buy how we sell. So how you want to be sold to is a good way how you should sell to your prospects as well. And ultimately, when I look back, if I could have been just more present and really focused on just serving the customer or the potential the prospect, then I wouldn't have done that. I would have paused and said, well, hold on. We've had good rapport, and definitely should follow up, but what would actually make sense? Like, what would be an appropriate level of follow-up that doesn't come off as desperate, that maybe can be more indifferent, but also ultimately will actually serve the customer? Because in addition to what you mentioned as well, I had heard the fortune is a follow-up, but I had no value there. I had zero value to bring this guy. So here I am. I'm just badgering. It's like the child in the back of the car seat. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? That's how I was. There was no value there. I wasn't following with anything of value to that prospect to open that conversation back up. I was just being a toddler at the guy's door trying to bang it down. So understand that, build that self-awareness, and ultimately you'll be able to close more of these opportunities. But also, more importantly, if you don't close it, at least you have a good rapport with them. Maybe you'll close them down the road.
Okay, very cool. Now, one of the things that I find really interesting on this topic is this idea of how can we be more valuable? How can we be more of a partner? How can we be more of a coach? The thing that baffles me is that it makes total sense what you said. We buy how we, or sorry, you said we buy how we sell, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Most of us forget that when we're in sales situations, we kind of forget the type of buyer that we are. For example, the type of buyer that I am, it's very research oriented. I go to Google, I do my comparisons, I see what A, B, and C is. I see what the social proof is. I kind of try it out for myself. I don't like to be sold to per se, because I like to make the decisions myself and make that discovery. But at the same time, I like to have a guide that will take me to the finish line when I'm ready. And I feel like a lot of people forget that. They make a sort of a disconnect there. So what is it meditation? Is it a Post-it note on our laptop? How can we remind ourselves that the people on the other line, on the other side of the email or the LinkedIn message or the phone or the SMS, they're human beings, and they're probably just similar to us in the way that they buy. how can we remind ourselves to be empathetic, to be considerate, to be the way that we want to be?
So I think the first thing to do is you have to be really self-aware, and sometimes it can be really hard to really realize what you're really like. And the first thing I would do, and it can be pleasantly horrifying, is listen to your own call recordings. If you're not recording your own call, especially in today's time, you should be recording all your calls and listening to all of them. In fact, I still listen to my own calls I run. I listen to my team's calls that we run. Like just today, we did a call review today. So this builds incredible self-awareness, because when you start to play back, you start noticing small little things that you could have made tweaks on. And a lot of times, to take your game to the next level, it's not major changes, it's little tiny tweaks. So when you realize, hey, when I ask this type of question, it's actually not, or if I ask a sequence of questions without pausing and diving deep, I'm actually not being present. Now, you may watch their own call recordings and you may not still be aware. So this is actually why it's really good to have a third party that's unbiased, listen to it, and coach you on the spot on those calls as well. So then from there, once you are aware of that, then it allows you to practice even more. And a lot of times I find most salespeople don't have a good process in place for how they run a discovery call, how they run a sales call. So what happens is they're very reactive on the call, so they're not able to really be present. They're kind of going, they're all over the place, kind of bouncing back and forth. And then they go down rabbit holes as they start thinking. They're like, oh, I'm going to ask this next. I'm going to ask this. And it seems very disorganized. There's not a controlled flow of thoughts. And that happens when you don't have a good solid process in place. So that means once you have a solid process in place, and once you are aware of what you're doing, you and how to improve it, then you got to practice. You got to actually practice what you got to practice what you learn, and you got to role play so you have mastery in the fundamentals. So the way I think about it's much like sports. When you watch a pro athlete, they spend 99% of their time off the field, in practice, working on the fundamentals of the game. So once they're on the field, when someone throws them the ball, they know exactly which play they're going to play. And it's no different for sales. When you practice your discovery and your sales process so much so you do it inside and out, so you actually are fully present once you're aware of the areas you want to improve. When someone answers a certain way or does something specific, you now know how to tweak and adjust on the spot without thinking. It's more instinctual. But it's not just, the instincts don't just happen overnight. They require you to be intentional to actually develop instincts so you can actually become better at your game.
Very cool. Very cool. You know, I recently purchased a Cameo. For those that don't know what Cameo is, it's a sort of a celebrity sort of video buying app where you can engage with celebs and get little short clips, video clips from them. You can get it for yourself. You can get it for your friends. Actually, one of the most expensive people on Cameo is actually Jordan Belfort. So since we're talking about sales, I'll mention him. And I think he puts his price tag is $999. And my theory on why it's he can charge so much is because his target audience is probably people that are in sales that make good money, and that it's sort of a motivational thing. So you buy a clip from Jordan, and then you get to share it with your team. $1,000 actually seems kind of a bargain if that works for you. But the person that I chose is Nick Bollettieri. And Nick Bollettieri is a famed tennis coach who actually most notably was the coach for Andre Agassi, who at one point was number one, and he won a bunch of Grand Slams and a bunch of great titles. And the advice that he gave me on my tennis game, of course, but it's so relevant for life, is practice your weaknesses. We've all heard that. But he said specifically, practice your weaknesses because they make your strengths stronger. Correct. And I found that really interesting because when we get confident at the things that we're not necessarily good at, we kind of flow into the things that we are good at. So I think that's a little bit of a rhymer, and it sort of is right in line with what you were saying, which is practice, just like the sports reference that you made. Practice, get a coach, do the listening. I really appreciate that advice. The other advice that he gave me was, always go for a shot. Anytime you have an opportunity, take it. Don't sort of let those opportunities go. And I think the same applies in sales. If someone is interested, step up, go for it. Be tactful, be kind, be considerate, be professional. But if there's an opportunity, you might as well go for it.
100% agree. I mean, A lot of times I see salespeople, they don't even ask for the business, right? Like they forget, they get
Mm.
like scared. They've earned the right. They've done a great job in discovery, and this could be over multiple calls. They handle all potential objections up front. They've shown tons of value. The customers are green. They're at that point where it's like it's time to ask for the business, and the customer's like not. They're not quite like they have not saying like let's go right now, and the salesperson's like so versus hey, awesome. It sounds like you're totally aligned. Should we just go ahead and get this wrapped up for you right now? Yes, we should. Let's make it happen. That's it.
Nice.
So it doesn't have to be a crazy hard close, but what happens is when you run a good sales process, it's a very logical outcome to a situation.
Right. Love that. All right. So you have an offer. In fact, you've got a website with a training program, sixfiguresalesacademy.com. I'm going to put the URL in the show notes here. I encourage people to check this out. Give it a click, see what it's up to. I think it looks pretty cool. Marcus, if you could take us through that.
Yeah, 100%. So, depend which link you put in there. So if it's the free training, I put in there my 3 steps to earning additional $50,000 to $100,000 more in commissions without just working harder. That's a pretty awesome free training. It's about an hour and a half long. It's very robust, but pretty awesome training right there. Yeah, that's exactly it. Boom. That's a pretty awesome free training. It's my favorite ones, our most popular one actually. So that one's really awesome right there. So definitely check it out. I mean, I really break down like 3 core steps that I utilize across my sales process. Really helped me just go from absolutely struggling to actually having success, figuring it out, but more importantly, being able to repeat the success over and over and over to get to the actual next level. So that's a pretty cool train right there.
Very cool. Nice. And then where can folks connect with you on social channels, Instagram, LinkedIn?
Yeah, I'm on pretty much most social channels. So LinkedIn, you can look me up. It's pretty easy to find. Marcus Chan, only guy that has Speedos in the body of the email or the messaging there. I sold Speedos at one point. I'm on Facebook. There's Instagram as well. You got that. Boom. I have a free Facebook group as well. So this is inside here. So I have about 20, 30 hours of free sales training as well. So I got a ton of free resources, completely free to join this group as well. It's really popular. We have over close to 3,000 members. And then, of course, there's my LinkedIn page on there as well. So it's all my best content is probably on LinkedIn, but all the training stuff, the actual like 20, 30, 40-minute hour trainings are free, are in that Facebook group as well.
Nice. Very cool. Well, I recommend that folks go and give you a click on your social channels, on your website, on your Facebook group, because there's obviously a lot of value here. And Marcus, I just wanted to personally thank you for your time on this podcast, man. This was really educational, some great reminders, some great kind of pro tips, and look forward to connecting with you and consuming more of your content.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, man.